Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order at this time. If you will, please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I will ask Councilman Scott if he will please lead us in the invocation.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time together, Lord, as we come to make community decisions, Lord, that impact us all. We're proud of the community we live and serve in, Father. Pray that those that are sick or injured or not well, that you'll be with them, Lord, tonight. As you keep comfort them, heal them to your will. Father, we pray that you help us make the best decisions to benefit us all as a group, Father. Be with those that are ill at home. Father, this holiday season we come into, we pray a special blessing over that, Lord. We know that's going to be different. We pray that it be centered around you. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, gentlemen, before we get started this evening, I have had a couple of citizens contact me about not being able to hear us when we speak. So especially with these masks on, we'll ask you to please try to speak up. If you are speaking, please pull your microphone towards you and speak directly into the microphone, because we do have citizens that actually watch us, and they would like to be able to hear what we say. So I just ask that you do that. Mr. Manager, I don't know if you can send a message or a text to Eric if there's a way that these can be adjusted. They may already be adjusted, but if he's got the ability to control these from where he is, I would ask that somebody maybe contact him and make sure that these are turned up, if that would help. All right, gentlemen, you have the agenda in front of you. There is one known change that I have to the agenda, and it is consent agenda item number 11. This resolution needs to be amended to reflect the additional equipment being conveyed to Smithfield Selma High School, and I believe we have that listed. You have a list of the items at your place. That is the only known change that I have at this time. Or is there any other changes or amendments to the agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with amending consent agenda item number 11, which is amending the resolution to reflect the additional equipment being conveyed to Smithfield Selma High School. Which, for those in the audience, is some items that are no longer needed at the fire department, and I assume these will be given to the fire program. Is that correct? Yes. Some turnout pants, some coats, hoods, boots, rope, hardware bag, and so forth. So that's what those items are. Items that are being surplus by the Smithfield Fire Department will go to Smithfield Selma High School's fire program. Okay. All right. So had a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right. We'll move on to our first public hearing. This is not a quasi-judicial hearing, so there's no need for anyone to be sworn in on this. It's ZA-20-04, Town of Smithfield. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the Town of Smithfield UDO Article 6, Table 6.5, Table of Uses and Activities to allow for a columbarium as an accessory use to churches, places of worship, with supplemental regulations in the O&I Office Institutional Zoning District, and adding two definitions to Appendix A. This time I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing. Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor? Stephen, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So this is a staff requested amendment, and it addresses columbariums in the O&I zoning district. I got an image here of a typical columbarium. A lot of us had to learn what actually a columbarium was if you're not in the industry. So I have a definition here of a columbarium. It's defined in statute as a structure or building substantially exposed above ground intended to be used for the interment of the cremated remains of a deceased person. A columbarium is typically associated with a cemetery, and in fact, GS 6548-3 defines cemetery as below: burial park, mausoleum, or columbarium. So the columbaria have increased in popularity as the cost of funerals and cemetery plots have increased. In response, many churches have been adding columbaria. The town has had an inquiry about adding a columbaria to a church, and after researching the issue, we found there are several already in town. In the O&I district, the Episcopal Church has an urn plot in a small garden setting. The Presbyterian Church, we believe, has one. St. Anne's Catholic Church is planning for one. They are currently in the B3 district, just as a fact. Staff feels it's not appropriate for churches in residential areas and business zoning districts to be allowed a columbarium. Upon research of other towns, there seems to be columbaria on church properties throughout Raleigh and other towns in North Carolina and the nation. Some jurisdictions are regulating them on church properties to address issues such as interment of cremated remains require maintenance into perpetuity, just as it would a cemetery plat. A church with a columbarium could be abandoned at some future date, leaving the fate of the deceased remains in question. So a lot of smaller church kind of pass from church to church and then become other uses. Sometimes they become residential uses. There's a lot of history of that. The location of a columbarium adjacent to a residential property could become a nuisance when there are ceremonies or the columbarium is very large. The interment of remains can be expensive, $1,200 or more. Actually, I've seen a lot more. And they could become a potential revenue source for a small congregation. Regulation on the size of the columbarium might be needed so that columbariums don't potentially become cemeteries. This UDO amendment would make a columbarium accessory to churches and places of worship in the O&I district with supplementary regulations. The O&I district contains most of the town's large places of worship and is where the existing columbaria are known to exist. Columbaria with places of worship in the O&I district are unlikely to be a nuisance or cause problems for adjacent properties, unlike with places of worship located in residential districts. An amendment addressing the various columbarium situations, an indoor or outdoor columbarium or urn plot, are addressed in this ordinance. Supplemental regulations are included to address long-term maintenance costs, alternate plans for future internment, dimensional considerations, the number of allowed internments, appearance, and signage. This ordinance amends Table 6.5, Table of Uses and Activities, and Article 7, Supplemental Regulations, and also Appendix A, the definitions. Here's some examples of outdoor columbariums. The first two are at the Episcopal Church. This is like an urn garden. And St. Anne's on their website shows the image below on the bottom left, a future planned columbarium. So I'm not going to really go through the details of this ordinance unless there are specific questions or the council would like me to, but the table of uses change is simply adding a permitted with standards under O&I to allow them in the O&I district, and then adding section 7.35 under supplemental regulations to direct people to those regulations. And then I have the ordinance in your packet's the same what I have here on the slide, the specific changes to the supplemental standards. They really address the three different types of columbarium situations that were, Bob worked on this as well. It's kind of been a team effort between Bob and I trying to address what we knew was in the ground. Now, since this has kind of made the news after the planning board meeting, I know Warren Grimes emailed me about something called an ash garden, where people put their ashes in the ground in a garden area with plaques on the wall. There's no actual urn in the ground. And so this ordinance does not address that situation. And talking to Bob, he thought we may have to come back and revisit that situation in regards to this ordinance. But I don't have any details on that tonight. Are there any questions on the ordinance? I could go to those sections if need be.
Any questions for Stephen?
I had a couple of questions. First of all, I read the ordinance and it said you had section 735, 1.2, and it says that the place of worship may spend annually from the fund, because it said they have to have a perpetual fund for maintenance and trust fund, and it says that that they can spend 3% of the fund as part of the annual trust, but I didn't see in here where it said how much they had to put into that trust. I can see what they can spend out of the trust, but how much money do they have to maintain in that trust? Because as you said, if the business was to go, if the church goes out of business, then the reason for having the trust is so that they can dispose of, or not dispose of, that's not a proper term, that they can relocate the remains into a different location. And that's what I understood the purpose of the trust fund was for. So where does it define in here? I just may not saw it.
It says from retained from half the price of each space. So an additional, that half of the price would go into a trust fund.
Where was that at? I'm sorry.
It's under 7.35.1.2.
Okay.
Funds retained from half the price of each space.
So they're going to have to maintain that to keep. So if they were to charge, let's say they charged $1,000 for it, they would have to put $500 aside, right?
That's right.
I wish they could draw 3% of that a year.
That's right.
Okay, and then I had another question. Thank you, sir, that answered that question. I don't know why I didn't see it because that's what I highlighted. The other question I had is, we just said that this ordinance would allow them in the IO district, but that St. Anne's is in a B3 district, and they're looking at adding that. So my question is this going to be possible that you could do a special use in a B3 district?
This ordinance doesn't suggest that.
Could we not? Now, I'm asking that question because we, as we know, we cannot hinder a church from going anywhere.
Right.
You understand? We could put some special use things on there, but even limited with that. So my question is, if there's a church that has a location, has the ability to do it, and not that we're anticipating, I would not anticipate the St. Anne Catholic Church going out of business anytime soon. So if they were to put one in there, I'm sure that they're going to take care of it. It would be, and so my point is, just because they're in a B3 district that we allow the church to go into, you see my concern?
Yes. What my thinking was on that was they would have the option to rezone to a O&I district. They're a big piece of land and they're an institution. They very well could and maybe should belong to the O&I district, especially if they're in a B3.
Okay, but so I understand what you're saying, but that's a particular situation, one particular situation. Mm-hmm. My concern was more systemically. If you have, since we're allowing churches to be put anywhere in town, in any district, mm-hmm. My question is there a way that we can include in here the ability that we could do a special use permit, because it may be, wherever they're located at, instead of them having to go back and get rezoned each time for something, if they brought forth a special use permit and we would agree that it made sense because they have the land or whatever to do it, then the council would be allowed to do that without having to go through the rezoning process every time a church wants to do something like this. You know, you see my point?
Yes, if that's the council's wish, we could certainly add that to the business districts, the other business districts,
As a special use.
as a special use.
Now, churches can also be in residential areas.
Right. And as I mentioned in my presentation, staff doesn't believe the columbariums are, that intensive of a use in a residential neighborhood makes sense.
Can I ask you why? Because, I mean, the ones that I've seen are pretty nice-looking facilities that they have. I mean, they're very nice, neat facilities. I've not seen anybody with dust hanging around, just saying. You know, I mean, they look pretty nice and neat.
I'm sorry.
No, so I'm just saying, I don't understand. So,
There are some really nice churches on some lots in residential districts that, have lots of landscaping and plenty of buffering, but there are many more that are more or less residential lots that are churches that are smack dab against houses and really are not well equipped to handle intensification. A special use process could address that, you're right, but the way we wrote it, we thought, let's try to limit it narrowly to the O&I district. And it's really up to council's wishes how you want to approach this.
because and I'll make one comment on that. My opinion on that is that I wouldn't want to pick out one particular church from another church as far as opportunities. I do think that if we were to put in some of these areas, a special use permit would be something that we would need to do to make sure that there's that if any concerns that we might have or that the community might have, because they would have an opportunity to express their concerns, that would be able to be presented, and because I don't know what type of, so could you give me an example? Maybe that's my problem, I'm ignorant. Can you give me an example of how this could be dangerous to the community?
Well, I mentioned in my presentation, in a residential zone, you can have a lot of activity and you're almost, a lot of those residential zones, if you're in the yard of the church, you're on somebody's property line. I mean, they're just really small properties. And it's residential, so there's a lot, adding more activities to a residential zone is a concern because of traffic. More gathering next to your home, more noise, ceremonies. Just thought maybe it doesn't belong in a residential district. Our cemeteries are only allowed in the O&I district and the R28.
Yeah,
So
that's
our
what
code
I-
already restricts those from residential districts and business districts. So we kind of modeled this, kind of looking at it the same way and just limiting it to the O&I. But I mean, we can change it if that's the will of the council. This was our first draft at it.
You answered my question was about cemeteries, and you just answered that, right? And I can't see the.
I didn't see anything in here about a number. Are you gonna have just one per site or?
It's in here. I'd have to find it.
That's what I didn't know if you said. I know you can have 200 urns in one, but how many can they have on a site?
I think it's a square footage. Number, no more than 200 urns. For outdoor, it's 200 urns. I think there's a,
So once that fills up, can they put another one, is what I'm asking. How many can they have on that one site? If you put
200.
So that's one, okay.
yeah. Yeah,
So I say it's not stated here how many you can have, so I just kind of figured if we did number.
And that's the outdoor columbarium. I'd have to page through the ordinance to see what we wrote for the other ones. It might be the same.
Mr. Winter, can you go to the next slide? Right there, it says a number shall provide urn places for more than 100 spaces.
Right.
Is that what you were just saying?
That's for an urn plot, so it's a different type.
So in a big church, 200 urns fill up pretty quick, I guess.
How many did you say you could put, oh, I see, it's number 4.4, it says 100.
This is for an earned plot. We have three different types that this code addresses.
Right.
A regular columbarium is 200 urns. Earned plot was 100. What did I miss? Indoor columbarium, I don't think there's a limit on the number. Okay.
Says, but it must present a plan with dedicated outside area for interment in the event the place of worship ceases to operate.
All right, so that would be off-site.
Right, that would what, they would have to, I mean, the point is, when they submit for that, they would have to define that in advance
Yes.
with that location. Would this, let me ask this, would there be a regular, a periodic review to ensure compliance? Because example, today they say, okay, I've got this land, this is where we go, and then they're not using the land for anything, so they sell it. Well, now they don't have they're violating their policy. I mean,
It's
and how would we know?
It's a good question, but no.
Okay, there's no way of knowing. I just,
It's a great question, but
Any other questions at this time for Stephen? Is there anyone in the audience that has any comments on this issue?
Mayor, I move we close the public hearing, seeing there's no comments.
Got a motion
Second.
and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I would like for us to add a special use permit for the other districts so that we could, for the places of worship that wants to do this, that feels like their members would like to have something of that nature. As long as they, I agree with the IO not needing the special use, this regular use, that's okay, because I think that makes sense. But I think limiting example, I should have to require the churches to go through the process of rezoning themselves to put in one of these. I just don't see that. I think that's something that we can handle through special use. The special use can give opportunity for neighborhood citizens to have a comment anyway. So my recommendation is, I recommend that we approve it with the addition, modification to include the special use in the business districts and in the residential districts.
okay.
That was a motion.
Yep.
Second.
All right. So I have a motion and a second to approve the text amendment ZA-20-04, with also allowing per a special use permit in the other district's business. Yes, sir, Mr. Manager.
Yes.
Yep.
So Councilman Barber, you suggested you want all of these?
I want it in the residential and the business districts. I only said the residential and the business districts. Okay, let's not put it in the mobile home district.
With supplementary standards, SS.
Yeah, I was thinking R20A, R10, R8, R6, B2, B3. That's where I wanted a special use permit put in.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So, Councilman Wood, did you second that?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, sir.
Okay, you're okay with that amended motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a second as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we'll move on to our second public hearing. Again, this is not a quasi-judicial hearing, so no need for anyone to be sworn in on this one. It is the bond agreement hearing for Johnston Court Apartments. Mike, is that you and Bob on this one, I guess? Sure. Okay. But this time I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a request from a company by the name of Vitus. We have someone available via the telephone. They're in Seattle. If we want them, if you have any questions for them. We also have a bond attorney here representing them, Kristen Kirby, back here in the blue mask, if some questions come up regarding that. This is a request by Vitus to have the town assist them in getting bond money to rehab Johnston Court Apartments. Johnston Court Apartments is located on K Drive. We're all pretty much aware where it is, been there a long time. Quite frankly, that housing complex has fallen into a state of significant disrepair. Before Vitus approached us and asked for our assistance, I had received some complaints from teachers from some of their children who live there, asking if we would send out inspectors because they felt that the properties should be condemned and were not inhabitable. And of course, we followed through on that. But the issue with Johnston Court is either it needs to be fixed or it needs to probably be torn down. And Vitus has acquired the property and they want to rehab the property. But they need assistance from the town in order to get the bond money that they require to make this process work. They could also use the Smithfield Housing Authority, could have assisted them in this process, but they chose not to be involved, so that's why it kind of came to us. In your packet, you'll see a portfolio on Vitus, but you also see some pictures, full-page pictures of a similar housing complex that they just finished rehabbing and what the interior of those apartments look like. Hardwood floors or laminate flooring, nice kitchens, nice bathrooms, very nice finished product there. So the way it was explained to me from Vitus was that's exactly what they're looking. Same construction people that did that work will come here and do the work on this complex. Bob Spence worked with Ms. Kirby on this matter. I believe he's got everything pretty much resolved so the town's interests are protected, and I'll ask him to step up and add some additional information.
So as Bob is coming up, I too have received complaints about this property, also from some teachers, and about the poor conditions of that apartment complex. So it is a concern of mine that they're in such bad shape. Bob, and I haven't seen them personally. That is just people calling me and complaining about them, and that did have pictures. Bob?
Well, this is an effort to obviously improve that situation. Ms. Kirby, do you want to say anything? Explain anything? Okay. She really just needs us to when to address the funding, but explain that. Because we're not funding it ourselves.
So, Ms. Kirby, if you will speak directly into this mic, and it's a little hard with your mask. Feel free if you want to take that off at this time. And if you will, please state your name and who you're affiliated with for the record, please.
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Kristen Kirby. I'm an attorney with McGuire Woods in Raleigh. We are bond counsel to the Burlington Housing Authority, who will be issuing the bonds in question that will be used to finance the acquisition and rehabilitation of a portfolio of 8 properties in total, one of which is Johnson Court Apartments. Of the total bond amount of approximately $53.5 million, $8 million of that would be used towards Johnson Court Apartments. The proposed rehabilitation is approximately $52,000 per apartment unit, so pretty significant rehab of this property. Vitus, as was mentioned, is based in Seattle, but they do affordable housing development across the country. They've done other projects in North Carolina, in Charlotte, and in Wilmington. The reason this is before the town council for a public hearing and approval is that under the federal tax code, in order to issue tax-exempt bonds for affordable housing, there has to be a public hearing followed by an approval in each jurisdiction in which the projects being financed are located. And that public hearing and approval has to be before the elected legislative body of the jurisdiction. So since one of these properties is in the town of Smithfield, we have to have that approval from the town council. As the town manager mentioned, we are asking the town also to cooperate in the issuance of the bonds. Under the North Carolina Housing Authorities law, cities and towns are given the ability to act as housing authorities. You can exercise any power that a housing authority could exercise, including the ability for multiple housing authorities or cities and towns acting as housing authorities to cooperate together in the issuance of bonds to finance properties in one or more of their jurisdictions. So on the cooperation front, it would be the town agreeing to cooperate in allowing the Burlington Housing Authority to be the issuer for the bonds that'll finance all 8 of the projects in the portfolio, including Johnson Court. The town the town does not have any financial liability whatsoever with respect to the bonds. They do not affect your legal debt limit or your debt ratios when you're doing your financial statements. The bonds are solely repaid from payments made by the borrower, the developer. We are looking to close on this bond issue in December, after which the rehab would start. This is an in-place rehab, so no tenants will be permanently displaced. I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have about the process or the bonds.
Any questions for Ms. Kirby? Or
Will the tenants have to reapply, the ones that are staying there now, will they have to reapply to stay there or what?
No, because it's already existing affordable housing, they likely already meet the income restrictions, so they'll be able to stay, and it'll be a phased rehab where tenants might have to be out during the day, but the developer would provide a place for them to go, and so they don't have to move out permanently or be displaced by the rehab.
So who will be the management company for this?
There'll be a new management company in place. I'm sorry, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but I can certainly find that out.
Okay, my other question I have is, so can you tell me, I'm just curious, why the Smithfield Housing Authority did not want to participate?
I think they were just uncomfortable with being involved. I don't really know. They didn't
give a reason?
honestly weren't very responsive, so I didn't have a lot of communication with them at all about it.
Different owner.
I'm sorry?
Probably a different owner.
Yeah, there'll be a new owner of the property. Vitus has acquired it from the previous owner recently as part of this process.
That's what I was going to ask. So how long has Vitus owned the property?
They just recently acquired it this year as part of this process. Issuing these kind of bonds is sort of a long process. You have to apply to the NCHFA for approval to do them. They also have HUD loans that are financing part of the project, so that's an application process to go through. So they acquired it in anticipation of this deal.
I've got a couple other questions, and one you may or may not be able to answer, and I totally understand that, but in our packet, on the staff report, it says the property has a history of poor management and security issues. That hopefully with Vitus recently purchasing this and the new management company, we will take care of the poor management side of it. But can you speak to the security issues? How do you, I mean, obviously Vitus, no matter who the management company is, should have some kind of say and some kind of control over that. Can you elaborate on that any or kind of?
Sure, I can say that I do believe there are some security upgrades as part of the rehabilitation. I don't know all the specifics of that, but I could certainly find that out, and I think some information on that might have been provided already to them.
And I just know we had a pretty large fire there last year, I believe, and I've seen the fire companies there within the last month. I don't know what that was, but within the last month, I've seen them there as well because I have to pass by there daily. So I assume all building codes, fire alarm, everything, obviously, that's a no-brainer. All that will be part of this rehabilitation.
That's right, and I mean, with, over $50,000 of renovations per unit, it's going to be a pretty extensive overhaul of the property.
And then my final question, I guess, that I have is that it says that there are eight properties within the portfolio. Mm-hmm. Each one of the municipalities or wherever has to support those, or are you seeking one municipality which would cover all 8 of these?
So the former. So Burlington Housing Authority is acting as the issuer for the bonds. 2 of the 8 properties are located in Burlington. So we had to have a similar public hearing and approval there. But we've also had to have a similar public hearing and approval in each of the other cities, Asheboro, Greenville, Lewisburg, Rockingham, and Goldsboro.
And those have already taken place?
Rockingham is also going on right now simultaneously. Goldsboro is next week, but the others have all.
They've all approved?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions.
So the time frame would all be renovated approximately the same time, or would we, how would you prioritize that with the other, or the 7 other properties?
Sure. So the plan is to close on the financing before the end of this year. Construction would start shortly thereafter, and I do believe there'll be construction going on at all 8 of the properties at the same time. Luckily, I don't have to deal with managing that part of the project.
So is Vitus do they control the management of the businesses afterwards?
Right, they would contract with the management company, and then, of course, like I mentioned, because there is a HUD loan, HUD also has some oversight of the property and would have to approve any change in the management company in the future. So an extra level of review there.
So they would contract with an outside management company,
Yes.
someone that already manages housing projects like this?
That's right, an experienced manager.
You don't know who that's going to be?
I don't know the name, but I can certainly find out and provide that.
I just want to, because I mean, if I look at this right here, what I'm saying is I'm looking here, this information I see shows about renovation, under renovation, under renovation, under renovation, under acquisition, but I don't, I was looking for the ones that are done.
Right.
And if there was the history of how the houses are going now, that's what I was just curious about, because I see this like this is something new, not something that they've been doing for a while. Is this new to them? Is something new?
No, this is an existing company that's been in business for quite a while and has done, I think it was just recent examples, which are therefore, still in progress.
Do what now?
They've been in business more than 25 years.
Any feedback on the company?
Why is that?
I'm asking you, did you have any, since the 25 years, any feedback on the company? Is it a good company? I mean, we just got things that they're gonna borrow money to do these things, and they need to maintain them afterwards. Somebody does.
Yeah, I think the information that was provided because they've tried to find something similar to what they're going to do in Smithfield so that you could get a feel and a look for what they're doing at this time and how they're moving forward. But they've been in business for over 25 years doing the same type of thing. I did talk to a representative from the organization, but I did not ask for references, and I did not go out and speak to any references. But everything that I was able to find and that I've provided you is positive information. I think it speaks too that they're willing to invest millions of dollars in this property.
Has Burlington Housing Authority utilized them before?
No, this will be their first project through the Burlington Housing Authority, but they have done projects in Charlotte with the Charlotte Housing Authority and in Wilmington with the Wilmington Housing Authority.
I guess the main concern, because the hesitation I had is that Smithfield Housing Authority, which would be the one that should be acting in this stead, is chosen not to participate. That's the only thing that gives me any concern, because they're responsible for, housing in Smithfield, and so not to be involved, that concerns me. That's why I was asking if there was any reason why they gave for not participating. That's the only thing. That was really my.
In the past, they haven't wanted anything to do with Johnson Court or any private organization that is some type of HUD housing. They only want to be involved with their properties. So I think it's just their practice in the past.
Okay.
Councilman Scott, I think you had a
Thank you,
question.
Mayor. My question revolves around the financing. It says in the notes, just want to confirm, Bob, you've confirmed that the town won't have any financial responsibility if this defaults for whatever reason?
Yes, the town can, the fee for doing this, is $20,000. And they, can, and we are investigating, or Greg is investigating, how well he feels about that, annually monitor the income levels of the tenants, to see that they are, within the range, income range that is suitable for this kind of subsidized housing. It does not seem to me to be terribly burdensome, but Greg has not decided whether the town wants to do that or not. They would be compensated, and that's negotiable within a degree. So that's not really addressed tonight as compensation. The main thing I think about this project is it's an upgrade to a project that has been under repair without apparently the necessary total financing for 2 or 3 years. They had a big grease fire out there. Apparently the mayor knows about that. Which is easy if you leave a pot boiling full of grease. But it should upgrade the property so that at least we will have a better property. Hopefully, a better property with better management. But at least you'll have a better property. You won't have a worse property.
And the other question I have is, how long before it matures, the bond? What's the term are y'all looking at?
So these are actually short-term bonds that are only outstanding during the construction period, so roughly 2 years. And just to kind of speak to your question too about the financial responsibility, again, the town does not have any financial liability for the bonds. It's clear in the documents that the only source of repayment for the bonds is the revenues of the project, but also these bonds are going to be issued as cash collateralized bonds, which means at all times the bond trustee will be holding sufficient cash to pay the full principal and interest on the bonds when they do mature. It's, can't say impossible, but virtually impossible to have a payment default since they are collateralized by cash. And then any of the town's expenses related to this approval, attorney's fees or anything like that, are all covered by the developer as part of the financing, so there's really no money out of the town's pocket or no financial liability from the town.
Thank you, Mayor, that's all, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this? Sir, if you will, please come forward. Okay. You what now? Oh, okay. All right, no problem. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Any other questions from the council at this time? If not, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Gentlemen, it's the pleasure of the board.
I make a motion to approve the request for the bond agreement for the Johnston Court Apartments.
Second. Motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Kirby. Appreciate it. Have a good evening. And now we'll move on to our next public hearing. Again, this is not a quasi-judicial hearing. It's ZA-20-03, Town of Smithfield. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the Town of Smithfield UDO ordinance, Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, to allow conditional zoning, provide for a quasi-judicial approvals of preliminary subdivision plats, adoption of Historic Preservation Commission regulations, incorporating 160D, enabling legislation changes and corrections to text designed to reduce ambiguous and ambiguities, and provide additional clarity. At this time, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open public hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Stephen? Whatever you, sir.
So it's a bit tall order having to deal with all these different items in one ordinance, and it impacts a large part of the UDO. So, originally I was intending to take article by article before the planning board and council in digestible bits, but 160D and quasi-judicial zoning kind of threw that away. So bear with me on this. So as the mayor said, conditional zoning, which is a new tool. Quasi-judicial review of plats, right now they're administrative. Adopting 160D, which is a new enabling legislation at the combining county and town statutes. The HPC district regulations never made it into the UDO. They were left in the administrative code, which is now being updated. So we're migrating those where the UDO, where they belong. And then as we all know, there's a lot of issues in our code, trying to correct them as we go. So conditional zoning summary, it's a negotiated approach to a legislative decision, like it's a rezoning, allowing maximum flexibility to tailor regulations to a specific site and project. So with every rezoning, there's a site-specific plan. You're approving a rezoning with a plan which you can conditionalize. It gives you more control. It's a negotiation. Everybody can see what it's going to be, rather than a blanket rezoning where all the B3 land uses are a potential. In this case, the only approved land uses are those on the plan. Our current PUD regulations are a conditional zone. It's just a very specific one tailored to mixed-use zoning. Conditional districts are parallel districts, so for every district we have, primary district we have in the code, you could potentially have a R8 conditional zone, a B3 conditional zone, etc. Through this process, our original desire was to get rid of, kind of migrate away from special use permits, because special use permits being quasi-judicial, they really limit the ability of the public to comment. It requires expert testimony, which is costly and difficult for addressing sometimes real concerns to residents. So our intent was to minimize land uses that required special use permits, and in doing so, we would reduce those in the table of uses, so there'd be fewer SUPs, and in the ones that we turned from special use to a permitted use, we would add supplementary standards that are a bit more difficult, much more strict, so that people would say, gee, maybe a conditional zone is an appropriate way to go. We can negotiate some of those strict standards with some flexibility. It gives the town more control, but then maybe it's a better process overall. So that was the intent, and I'll get into that further. Quasi-judicial permitting plat processes. Right now, they're administrative. Our code says you need to have full-blown engineering plans with a preliminary plat. Developers don't like to do that. We've been somewhat lenient on that because it just doesn't always make sense. This will allow the town council to put conditions on subdivision approvals, or right now it's a straight up and down vote. So it gives you more control again in terms of addressing concerns you see that maybe the code doesn't specifically address. It would require public comment and expert testimony. Public comment requires expert testimony just like any other quasi-judicial process, so there is that. This change would also allow developers to submit preliminary plans without complete engineering drawings, lessening their upfront costs. You can conditionalize it, meeting the UDO and other conditions as you feel appropriate. We can get as much information as needed to address the issues at hand without a full-blown engineering drawing, as we've actually done in the past. Oh, I went the wrong way. 160D, as I mentioned, that's a new enabling legislation. Every town has to adopt it by July 1st, 2021. This particular amendment only addresses Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We're going to continue with the next articles after this, and we will include the 160D updates with that as well. But that was too much to chew at one time. I wanted to get through this conditional zoning and these issues, and we can take that next step. But we have till July to do it. And I already mentioned HPC was left out for whatever reason. We need to put it somewhere because they're updating the administrative code. And there are some changes to that which I'll get into. Key points to consider: conditional zoning will follow the same process as rezonings with a new public meeting notices at the planning board. So the planning board will hold noticed meetings to review the rezonings and make recommendations to the town council. So currently rezonings go to the planning board, but there's no public notice. Typically nobody shows up for the planning board meetings because they don't know about them. And in this case, they're not officially a public hearing. You will hold the official public hearing, but people will be noticed that there is a meeting where this is going to be discussed, and adjacent neighbors will be noticed if it impacts them, so that they can come and express their concerns earlier in the process than before the council, the final decision. For special use permits and preliminary subdivisions, both being quasi-judicial, the current draft provides the same process for both at the planning board. Noticed public meetings will be conducted at the planning board to provide an opportunity for community involvement outside of a quasi-judicial hearing. It will provide feedback to the developer without ex parte communication to the council. So it'll be just a private discussion at the planning board with neighbors, the developers. You will not get minutes to those meetings, that part of the meeting, because that is potentially a violation of the ex parte communication. But this does help the planning board really inform the process, which is their desire. Currently, our special use permits only go to council for a hearing. So we are adding an additional meeting for special use permits. I know there's been some concern about that, but given we're doing quasi-judicial preliminary plats, I feel it's important we follow the same process for all quasi-judicial for consistency. And also, when a developer has the option to go special use permit or conditional zoning, there's no shortcut just going to a special use permit, having one meeting. It's essentially puts them on the level playing field in terms of time, and again, makes the conditional zoning a more compelling option and limits the amount of special use permit hearings we will hold. So those are the reasons. Another thing I just wanted to point out, our code is very unclear right now about when special use permits expire. Perhaps our code doesn't allow them to expire unless, they're still in the process of doing their initial development. But in terms of special uses that have been operating for, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years, and all of a sudden they go dormant for 2 years, in this case, we're saying 6 months or more, then it becomes null and void, and they'd have to renew. And the issue is really, this will help the town get rid of the many non-conforming uses we have, particularly South Brightleaf. So as I mentioned, 6.5 has been amended to minimize the number of special use permits. And then wherever that's happened, we've referenced new supplementary standards for those uses. These changes really need to be looked at carefully. I mean, staff has done the best job it can, but council should be aware that it can be sensitive and some uses maybe need to be looked at. And I'll kind of point out a few of them as we go. Major subdivision plats will be administratively approved by staff with appeals to the BOA, the Board of Adjustments. Public dedications will still require approval by resolution, and we typically will do those by consent. So again, the final plats are really just kind of a final approval of something that the council's already approved, just making sure it's substantially similar to the preliminary. As long as it's substantially preliminary, it'll be approved by staff. Okay? If it's not substantially similar, they'd have to go back through the replatting process, preliminary plats again, or if they appeal my decision, then it would go to the BOA. Okay? Just to clarify. Another thing is we had previously mentioned, this draft reactivates the R6 zoning district, 6,000 square foot lots, reversing a previous policy or previous code which did not allow us to rezone any new land to the R6 district. We're doing this to accommodate market demand for smaller lots. As you know, the South Smithfield, there was, 8 lots in South Smithfield that were just developed. They were existing R6 lots that they're putting very nice homes on. So, which, in a sense, it's not always the size of the lot that dictates the product. In the market demand, people don't want a lot of land. They don't want to maintain things like they used to. We have an older population, so in a sense, we're trying to address the future growth, demand for the market, and just being ready for what's coming. And then, as I mentioned, Article 7 has got many new supplementary standards. These probably should be reviewed closely. We tried to make them thoughtful, and we used other codes that we thought were good examples to create standards that would typically be conditions you would put on a special use permit, but just have them be required by right. So what would happen then is you would get those people saying, gee, maybe I want to go conditional zoning if I can't meet those standards. And we already talked about 160D. Now getting back to Article 6.5, this ordinance doesn't require changes to Table 6.5. We could just hold off and keep the existing table of uses as it is and come back and revisit it later, especially if special use permits have the same process as conditional zoning, two hearings. Before, I felt it was more important because special use permits would have been more desirable because they only had one meeting. So, all things said, if the council is uncomfortable with the changes in 6.5, that could be addressed later. And Article 7 then could also, but I'm much more comfortable with Article 7 being included. So with that, staff has not planning to go through all the details, the individual changes. I tried to outline them generally per section. Any of those that stand out you want to talk about, I'm willing to talk about. I guess I'd like your feedback and some direction. And of course, it's a public hearing.
Any questions for Stephen at this time from the council? So Stephen, I, on the surface, don't really have an issue with the R6 zoning, but I don't have the zoning map in front of me that would allow the 6,000 square foot lots, right? And I think that before we approve this, I think we ought to understand how that's going to impact things. I understand that the current market demand may be for that, but that's not to say that the current market demand will be the same 10 years from now, right? And there was a reason why we took that out. Again, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying I think we need to understand what that impact could be, right? And I don't know if we have a zoning map here or not, or if the council's actually looked at that, but that would just be one of my thoughts and suggestions, and that kind of stuck out to me, as far as this goes. And then I guess the other question I had is, we met jointly with the planning board, correct, on this? So, and talked about a lot of things. I guess my question is based off of the discussions that we had at that meeting, is there anything that has changed in this proposed draft amendment that we did not discuss at that joint meeting with the planning board?
I don't believe so, except for all rezonings would have a public meeting advertised at the planning board, which originally my draft, when I went to the planning board, I did not include that second meeting,
Right.
advertised meeting for rezonings, and they conditionalized the approval that I included. So that's in here.
Right. So now requiring 2 meetings.
Well,
Is that-
requiring a notified, right now, the rezonings do not require public hearings or public notice at the planning board. They wanted the public notice piece
To
to
go
be
out.
included.
Gotcha.
So that is
Okay.
included now.
So they were already meeting, they just weren't notifying
That's
people
right.
of the meeting.
Gotcha.
In
Okay.
other words, if you own property next door, you may not find out that it was getting rezoned.
Until they came
It's already
here.
been heard at the planning.
Yep. Okay. Anything else that you're aware of?
I don't think so.
I'll make a comment. I appreciate the work you guys have done on this. Because, we have piecemealed this stuff for the last 3 years I've been on the board. And I'm glad to see that this is the approach that you took to go through and fix it. Everything we could at one time, up to these points. I know you got some more you need to do, but because I went through and read it, a lot of the stuff, I said just simply some cleanups and stuff like that, things that we really needed doing. And, I'm sometimes hard-nosed on you guys, so I just want to let you know, I do appreciate the work that you guys did, because I think it's, I think it shows a lot of work that was done. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. Trying to get the zoning map up. Adobe's not loaded on this software. Bing's got it. So you want to know about the R6 district. So R6,
Yeah, I just think it's important, right?
Yeah,
If
it's-
if we're including that back in, I think the council needs to understand
What it is,
what it
what it
is, and
entails.
how it's going to impact, right?
yeah, so R6 are 6,000 square foot lots, and they're in this color, this gold color, best as you can see that. You can see it's East Smithfield.
Can you expand that? I'm sorry, my eyes just are not.
Yeah, I know. I can't get the whole map in. We've got a big city.
I don't care the whole map, just the R6 zone.
Well, it's kind of in different places. So, I don't know if the pointer works. It doesn't work on that screen. So, this is the R6 on South 2nd Street that we just approved.
So if we don't change it back, all the goal would have to be a special use.
No, they'd already exist. These are R6 that already exist. It's just that the lands beyond the town, the new growth areas, you could then see some new R6 requests.
Oh, okay.
Council wouldn't have to necessarily approve them, because rezonings are at the discretion of the council. We have R6, we have R8 and R10 as standard districts. If we go to conditional zoning, I'm already seeing people with R8 wanting to do R8 CUD, and one of the conditions they want to change is the lot size.
Right.
Which is basically R6. We could just leave it the way it is and use the conditional zoning to get the smaller lots, or we could do R6 by right. Again, you'd have the ability to say yes or no to the rezonings. Our land use map doesn't really
But let's
distinguish.
just stop right there, though. And Bob, so, again, please don't take my comments as being against this. I just want to make sure that we are clear and we really think about this. I understand what you said is that we still have the option to turn it down. But if a rezoning comes to us, and it is a use that's permitted by right, it is a whole lot easier to turn that down, right, to deny that. Would that be a fair statement, or? You see what I'm saying? I mean, if we include this in by right, and somebody comes and wants to do exactly what you're saying, is put in smaller lot sizes, and we, for whatever reason, we say this is just not the right area for it, their argument's going to be, well, I have that right because,
No.
am I missing something there?
Yeah,
What am I missing?
You don't have to rezone property. It's a discretion of the council. You don't have to have specific reasons. I wanted to point out, though, that our land use plan has low density, the R20A, kind of that type of density. Then it has, the next layer is really equated to like an R10 district, kind of the densities match. But then when you get to R8 is considered medium density, and R6 is considered high density, but we don't have any areas guided in our land use plan for that high density. So that is an issue with our current land use plan. We didn't really, the reason is it's labeled high density in our code, but really those densities are considered medium density today. So R6 and R8 really are both medium densities. And our plan doesn't distinguish where they should go.
So Bob, do you agree with what Stephen said as far as the ability to turn the zonings down?
Sort of change that. To the extent this is R6, it's R6.
That's
They
it.
don't build houses in there at that level, it's fine. And you've got a little urbanization issue going on here. Whereas, I think Forbes last week is eliminating R6.
Right.
On the idea that they would have nicer yards and it would upscale.
So right, so that's kind of my point, right? So, because I've had those discussions with our neighboring town, so I've got one town that's eliminating it, and now we're bringing it back. Not saying that's wrong, I'm just saying we need to understand. So, Bob, if you don't mind, if you will, please speak into that so we can hear.
The issue,
Thank you, sorry.
is urbanization and becoming more upscale. If you go to Wake Forest, where the average income is high in comparison to most of us, if you go to Wake Forest, you're going to see a lot of R6. It's going to be just like across from the dog park, a nice $300,000 houses with 60 and 80 front feet, okay? And the people there, they want the 60 front feet because they have two-income families, they work, They make good money, they get a big house, they don't want to mess with the yard, okay? It's a change, you know, and I think when you see the smaller communities, which have not seen the growth level you've seen, like Four Oaks, I mean, my personal feeling is they will reverse, because they're going to end up doing what Andy Ammons has done all over Wake Forest, which is develop, you know, with higher density lots, and they sell like hotcakes up there, okay? So that's sort of what we're getting here, but that's not been, I know one time Pine Level was trying to have almost acre lots, you know, thinking that they would get out, would therefore would require more upscale development. But you can see exactly across from the dog park, what happens, those are extremely nice houses on those blocks, okay? And they are among the nicer houses in South Smithfield. And they are on very small lots, and a lot of yuppies, urban people who moved in, they like it. And they like the smaller lots, and they don't want to spend their Saturdays mowing the grass. And that's what we're going to be dealing with. I think Smithfield's going to deal with it before some of the other communities, and your smaller communities are not going to have seen it. Right. But it's there. You'll see it in Raleigh, and you see it, Wake Forest is North Raleigh.
So the existing areas that we see here, it doesn't really impact that anyway, right? So this would be for any future growth, right? And I guess at that time, I'm also thinking sewer, right, from a county standpoint, right? We've got that to deal with, and especially with growth coming in. Eventually, we may have to have those type discussions, right? But I guess that all that could be, if taken into consideration, should we decide if we wanted to rezone or not, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
You can rezone, you can downzone, or whatever you want here. You can put in more smaller zoning, as long as it fits some kind of rational pattern. Not supposed to be irrational. You can see in the past we have R10 zonings where a lot of the bigger houses are built in the most of our built in the 70s and 80s. I think the lifestyle changes. R6 is going to become something different from what it was.
Okay. Mike, did you have something?
I just wanted to clarify that I don't think Stephen is just making sure. We're not looking to change the zoning map and add a bunch of R6 area, and then people are going to come in by right and be able to build in there.
That was my concern.
That's where you were going. That is not what we're doing here.
Okay.
Right now, we don't have an R6 option available to us. So if someone come in and wanted to rezone to R6, they can't. So they would have to do R8, and then we would have to do conditional use zoning to try to shrink the size, which is a whole lot more cumbersome process. If we had an R6 option, someone wants to come in and rezone to R6, you get to decide if you want it or not. But if you want it, then you're done. Everything would be done administratively, because then they would have it by right. We wouldn't have to go through force the developer to go through this whole larger process.
Right.
When he said zone by right, R6, what he meant was after you rezone it,
Then they'd have that use by
then they have
right,
a
whatever
right.
zoning
The
district.
process will be streamlined.
Gotcha.
That's the purpose.
So one more question and then I'm done, gentlemen. So, but Bob, you had mentioned Wake Forest. Just as an example, we say R6, but when we say R6, does 6,000 square feet? Does that mean 6,000 square feet is what is R6 in Wake Forest?
Typically, it's the same.
Okay, I don't know, right? Because I just want to make sure when we use an example of Wake Forest and they say R6, are you talking about an 8,000 square foot lot?
Well, you can do 6,000 or 8,000, depending on what you're going to build.
No, but what's your minimum, I guess, yeah.
There are just a tremendous number of R8s out there in R6 and Wake Forest. Tremendous houses.
I think the question is, R6 in Wake Forest, is that a 6,000 foot lot?
That was my question.
60 and 80 foot long front lot.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Yep. It shows a comparison. So what is this? I didn't realize there was one. I had a question in the material I saw, and I didn't know what it really comparison to. On page 47 of the packet you gave us, it has this chart here. It looks like this. It has this table, and it's got Clayton, Apex, Selma, Garner, Holly Spring, Benson.
Sure, sorry, I didn't.
And it says in the top corner, 60-foot wide by 60,000 square feet lot.
The mayor at our last joint meeting with the planning board had asked for kind of comparison of what other towns were doing. And so,
Doing with what?
with lot sizes. And then I also went in to discuss special use process, preliminary plat process.
Right, but is this R6 across the top?
At the top layer, 60-foot wide lot, 60,000 square foot lots. That is the R6 zone.
Okay, but then there's another one that's got Selma has 50 feet by 8,000, and Garner has 60 feet by 9,000. Holly Springs 60,000 by 8,000 square feet. So I'm saying there appears to be differences here in those lots. So you're saying are all of these R6s? They're just different size R6s then, right?
I'm just giving you the sizes, their minimum lot sizes.
But are these R6 zoning? That's what I'm saying.
And hence my question.
Clayton's is an R6. Apex is just the minimum lot they allow with a 40-foot wide lot. They probably have an R6 district, but I wanted to put that they have smaller lots allowed.
Oh.
Selma, they have 50-foot wide, 8,000 square foot lots as their smallest lot.
Is that an R6? That's what.
That would be an R8.
That'd be what?
That would be R8, but the
Okay, so they don't have any R6. I see what
the
you're saying.
difference is our R8 has a much wider frontage than what this
All
one
right, I
has.
understand.
So I just try to give you a comparison of lot sizes.
So could you do this for me? So for Clayton, what type of zoning would that be?
That's an R6.
R6, thank you. Okay, hold on. Apex, what is that?
You know, that, I can't tell you.
Who knows? Question mark. Okay, that's fine. Selma,
That's an R8.
all right, and Garner, the R8, right?
I'm not entirely sure.
Well, it's 60,000 by 90 feet, which is bigger than the one in Selma.
Yeah.
So it's at least an R8.
Yeah.
Holly Springs would be the R8,
R8.
and Benson would be
R6.
R6. So what we're saying is that Clayton and Benson and probably Apex have R6s as their minimum size, right? And Selma has R8, Garner has R8, and Holly Springs has R8 as their lowest small lot size. Am I reading that right then,
Yeah.
basically?
Now,
And
for
so you're
instance,
saying Smithfield has some R6s still, right? So now we're looking at putting it back.
Yeah, I can tell you, like Garner, living in Garner, almost everything there is being done as a planned residential development, so they're allowing much smaller lots or different lots through a planned development process, which is like a conditional zoning.
I was getting ready to ask that question. All right. So what we were doing, if we were to approve this, we possibly, this is high level, could have some of the, with the term I'm trying, the tools that Garner utilizes. Is that correct? Because as boring as it may be, I watch that television show that shows their meetings, and I hear what they're going through, and it just seems to me like they have so much better control over some of the things that are going on. The council, as you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and I think you and I had
The
discussed this
conditional zoning
previously.
is that process where you're going to have a plan with a lot of those zonings that gives you that control.
Right.
It's like a planned unit development. You can dictate kind of.
You can dictate more things, right? A lot of questions that I hear their council members ask, and their attorney saying it's okay, the way we presently operate, Bob would be telling us we could not ask those questions.
Yes.
Right. So that's,
Particularly because of our our lack of, our administrative subdivision code.
right, okay.
Okay. So if we don't include R6s, and a developer wants to build lots the size of R6, they could still do so if they got conditional zoning, correct?
Yes, with an R8 conditional
So
zone.
it'd be, to your point then, as we said this whole other thing, the objective would be to drive people to conditional zoning instead of the other. So it looks like to me that the recommendation would be not to have new R6s, leave it out, so that these we're not going to limit the developers from having these smaller lots. They just have to do it through conditional zoning. Is that right?
You could argue that, but I think there may be places where there are some infill lots or some areas in town that just make sense to have R6 because it's already existing there. You're just adding on to a neighborhood or a redevelopment parcel or something where somebody wants to do R6. Like the South Smithfield 8 lots, those actually were final platted already at that size, but they weren't zoned that way. So we had to rezone them. I think that's what we did anyway.
Could we not have used conditional zoning if we had that right, though, to
No,
do
we
that?
could have.
That's what I'm saying. So,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
just more cumbersome process for them. So I'm just saying, in some case, it might just make sense to do R6 zoning. You have the discretion whether you want to do a base zone of R6 versus a conditional zoning and make them do that process.
Yeah, and I'm okay with bringing the R6 back with the understanding that I have now, right? I was a little confused at the beginning of this, but
Understood, it's a
if
lot
we,
to chew
if we
on.
have that option, right? Whenever we have removed something and want to bring it back, I want to make sure that we fully understand what that means.
There was a
I think I'm
movement across the
comfortable with
country
that.
for larger lots. I mean, just in general,
Right.
everyone suburbanized in the 70s and 80s, well, mostly the 70s, and, in some cases to the detriment of a lot of communities.
well, I know so my next door neighbor just sold his house, and house flippers bought it. Bought it for $139,000, is going to sell it for $250,000 when he gets through redoing it. And one of the biggest factors is because the size of the yard is so much bigger in our neighborhood than it is in the new neighborhoods. Just saying. So, I mean, we're looking for revitalization. I talked to you about that. We're looking for revitalization in West Smithfield. It's going to be a big factor, and that means our house values go up, Roger. But, and if you're not interested in moving, that just means taxes go up.
I know a good real estate agent if you guys want to put your house
Well, my
up
point
for market.
is, the point is that we're going to see that happen too. Do you think perhaps that as we move out of town though, people moving out of town, that the inner parts of town, because today West Smithfield is still somewhat outside of the town. It's in town, but you know what I mean? So the outer part of the town, and so therefore yards are bigger. Do you think as we continue to develop going outward, and I'm thinking about this because it's related to the UDO, as we continue to expand outward, do you see more smaller smaller lots being built on the outside of town, or do you think that you see, as we urbanize in town, that development in town becomes smaller lots?
Yeah, I know exactly your question. I can tell you I'm getting requests for small lots everywhere.
Okay.
And I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, I think the smaller lots should be focused around those mixed-use nodes that we have in our map. Some of them are not right in town, but there's some centers like Buffalo Road. There's a few areas where we think smaller lots make sense, maybe by West Smithfield School, although we don't have it that dense. But where there's nodes of activity, it makes sense to maybe have smaller lots, shorter distance to walk between frontages. But then as you get out, R8, R10, R20A, I think makes sense, and our land use plan supports that. And I don't think you're going to see a lot of places where you're going to want to do a R6 rezoning in general, but there might be just some smaller cases here and there that make sense. And it just seems like it makes sense if that's what the market's asking for, we probably should have that tool in our bucket. Again, you still have the ability to say no.
So the last question I have for you is on the development of people, not trying to divulge anything that's been going on, but based on the information that you have, do you see the developers are coming to you with projects that are going to be coming up in the future? Are they targeting R6 lots or that size lots?
I think every development I've been approached, they've been asking for 60-foot or smaller lots, frontage width. And it's probably not appropriate everywhere. And our land use plan isn't guiding us that way.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I did want to point out a few things in table 6.5, if you give me the moment here. There's a lot of terminology here that's really outdated, so you'll notice that. One thing I've seen in a lot of codes, for instance, we have this private clubs, which up north we call those bars. And I think most people recognize them as bars or nightclubs, just because the ABC calls them private clubs. I think we can call them whatever we want in our code. My thought here was to list them as bar or nightclub, special use permit with standards, so that doesn't change, but just giving a terminology that the average person would understand. So that's something I highlighted on the table, just so you guys would pop out at you. And, again, now that we're having the hearings, the parallel process for special use permits and conditional zoning, getting rid of all the special use permits is less important, but I still think it is maybe a good thing to do. I think that was one of the big ones I wanted to point out. And then multifamily, I kept multifamily as a special use permit, just because I was less comfortable, because they can be so complex that basically we have protection in either way, whether they go special use permit process or a conditional zoning process. But we did beef up we did create standards for multifamily regardless, which we hope will push them to a conditional zoning for multifamily projects. I just wanted to point that out. That is something that I kind of late in the game had changed in the process here, or in the table of uses.
So, well, I have a question. You had public schools and private schools, public and private schools. They were special use, and they've been eliminated from residential areas.
Let me find that.
It's on page, on page 6-9. It's permitted in OI, and that's it.
Yeah, the thinking was that if you force them to rezone to O&I, that gives you more control, because now it's a rezoning.
Yeah, but what I see, if you look at a lot of the houses, there have been a lot of these houses, they pump a school up in there. A lot of times the developer is, they actually pay a lot of the effort to the school to put the school there, because it attracts people to build in those communities. So I wouldn't want to hinder that from the potential growth for us in the future. I don't know when that was removed, or you were removing it now. I don't know if the dash mark means that we're just now suggesting to remove them.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that. My number
It's on page 6-9 of the chart that you just said.
I got double-sided, so I'm
Yep.
struggling to find it on here. That's what I mean. Some of these changes, I'm glad you're looking at it, because,
But you understand what I'm saying? I mean, residential, putting schools in a residential area is not unusual. I mean, I see a lot of that being done.
Oh, yeah, so the thinking was it's an institutional use, and it gives you guys control whether you want a school, where you want it, and they could rezone it to O&I, even if it's in a new subdivision. It could be part of the rezoning to O&I, and the other parts could be residential. It helps, it identifies the schools on the map. Most of our schools are O&I already. So that was really the thinking there. Again, really the council's preference. I was just trying to remove special use permits from the table where I thought it made sense. And in this case, it seems like schools belong in a O&I district. So that's why that change was made.
I guess my question is, so if someone's looking at the chart and they see that the only option you have is a rezone for OI, would that be a hindrance to somebody wanting to do that?
I would think if they're dedicating, I mean, it might be, That's just my
That's
perspective.
what that's all I was saying, I mean, because they still have that option
The more
to
likely
rezone to
gonna-
OI. I mean, they can still do that anyway, even if you allowed it to still maintain as a special use permit. They could certainly they could still do the OI without any, I
Right.
mean, you know what I'm saying? That would still be an option.
If it's a new development, they could go mixed use, and the school would be part of that mixed use plan. So it would be part of that rezoning.
That's what you would be
Or-
recommending to them if they had that idea and brought you that, because obviously they would have a.
It could be, yeah. Or they could, when they go for a rezoning from R20A, let's say, because almost all the new growth areas are R20A, they would request instead of R28 to R8, they would say R28 to R8 and O&I for the school site. I mean, it's not necessarily more cumbersome, it's just kind of clarifying the zoning map. It's not a huge point for me either way. I was just trying to streamline the table.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate your comments and your look at it. And again, we don't have to change the table at this moment to make this all work. This was just part of the original intent to push people into conditional zoning. Now that we have the same hearing process for both legislative and quasi-judicial, I think it matters less.
Is there a timetable to get this done? Is there a pressing issue to get this done so we can start doing the conditional zoning? Is that something that we need? Or is it, and I'm asking that because there was a lot, I mean, I'm just gonna be honest with you. And there's a lot of information that I got on Tuesday.
Sure.
And I'm just saying that, that there's lots of little things in here that we can look at to see, that feel more comfortable with. And I just didn't know if there's a time, if there's a pressing matter to do all of this, because we do it, we have to do it all, because that's the way it's set up, It wasn't like just this one thing, it's to do it all.
My expectation or my hope was to get this all done by January.
Okay,
I've been
okay.
telling developers who have interest in this tool that we'd want it by January.
Okay, so the point is, we did have, if we needed to, we could put this aside and delay it for a month and then bring it back up again.
Or I could even suggest that you could approve everything but the changes to table 6.5.
But I don't know if that's the only changes I want to make.
Okay.
I'm just pointing because I don't want to put my fellow councilman on the spot, but I didn't have a chance to read all this material. I mean, I looked at the highlights, what you got, that's all, I'm just being honest. I looked at what you had on here, but I haven't gone through every page, because I just, not in that time period, I didn't have time to do that.
Yeah, I can tell you though, since this tool has been discussed, there's been many, many, many situations where this could be very useful to both staff and the developer.
I have no
And
doubt.
it's been very well received by both.
So
So-
to answer your question, certainly, we could do this. We could even schedule a separate meeting. We could either recess this meeting into a time certain, or we could just, schedule a meeting, at a certain time, or wait till the December meeting, or whatever. There's several options there, if the council
The UDO,
decided.
we're constantly modifying the UDO though. You understand? This is an important document because we're constantly changing. I mean, we're constantly changing. I think it's important for us to know what it is and to feel comfortable with it and get it fixed. And I just would be a little leery about rushing through with this many changes. And maybe to the point is, you could incorporate some of the additional changes, and to the mayor's point, maybe we could have a separate meeting just on the UDO to go through the changes and make sure we feel comfortable with what's going on. Because that also help us understand the UDO better. As things come for us, we know what they mean. That's just my opinion. But.
What's the thoughts from others on the council? You guys have any issue with?
Well, Mayor, I do have some concerns. I also realize that these people's time is important, and it's 8:35, and we're only on the second item, it's the third item. We've got a bunch of other stuff to cover, so I feel like we should probably have some other time to revisit this topic.
Okay. All right.
But we are in a public hearing, so I don't know if you wanted to see if anybody had.
Oh, yeah, no. We will. We'll do that. I'm just thinking. Council, you guys want to just maybe schedule another meeting and,
What time look at this?
Yep. Okay. All right, so we'll do that. Okay, all right, anybody else, in the audience wishing to speak or against this matter?
I mean, if we speak now, is public comment go on to the next meeting, or do we need to wait?
This will be your opportunity, right? Would there be opportunity? Probably so, but I don't know if we'd conduct that more of a working type session. So if you'd like, please come forward, sir. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Mark Blaine. I live at 2108 Yelverton Grove Road, Smithfield. Come to you tonight as a member of the planning board, representing the planning board. Also have Ms. Doris Wallace here, who's also a member of the planning board. Asked her if she wants to speak. She declined. She's here to support what I'm getting ready to tell y'all. Come before you tonight to emphasize the additional recommendations the planning board added to the ordinance amendments. The planning board has recommended that public input be included in the conventional zoning and also in special use cases heard by the planning board. We understand in special use cases, these amendments may slow the process for business applications, but special use cases also include solar farms and many other uses besides new businesses coming into our community. Let me give you an example. If a solar farm was built adjacent to your property, it is required that all the adjacent property owners be notified no less than 10 days before, but no more than 25 days from the council hearing. I talked with a planning staff member, and I was told that the planning department usually notifies property owners around the 10 days prior to hearing. So that means that if a citizen needs to hire an attorney to represent them in this case, they would have that attorney would have either 10 days to prepare or ask for the case to be tabled. Planning board members have had we get numerous calls from adjacent property owners that when the case is heard at council level, the question always is, was the case heard before the planning board? A lot of times it is, probably the majority of the time. And of course, our answer is yes. And their next question is, why was I not notified? My answer when they ask that question is, there's only one public hearing. The UDO requires only one public hearing, but the planning board is trying to add amendments and will be presented to the council so the public input is heard. And not only the council meeting, but the planning board meeting. In closing, you have appointed in-town members to the planning board. County commissioners appointed me since I'm an ETJ member. The planning board voted unanimous to add the additional recommendations, and we ask that you have the confidence in our decision to pass the amendments as they have been presented to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay. Any other questions at this time?
Mayor, I might just ask Mr. Winsman, the things that he mentioned, that's exactly what you presented tonight, am I wrong?
Yes,
So this is what they're asking for?
yes.
Okay. We were kind of sure on that.
Yeah, after the meeting, I added that change to the zoning
Is
as
that-
they requested.
Is that correct, Mark?
Well, what I presented,
When we made the recommendation, when the planning board made the recommendation to come to the council, we added the two additional.
notified meetings for rezonings. You
Right.
guys did not have notified rezonings.
Right. So we added that, but it was as an addition. But you included it in your presentation.
Yes.
So it's still the same thing.
Okay. Any other questions at this time? If not, I say we just, after we close the public hearing, I guess we can just table this matter, or just not take any action, or schedule another meeting. I mean, I don't think we're going to get a meeting time tonight, in other words, so.
You have the choice of recessing this meeting without adjourning it to a date certain to
Right.
discuss this item in a workshop. You can adjourn the meeting, but when you table it, if you table it, you need to table it to a time and date certain. So that could be December 1st, which is your next meeting. And then if you don't get through it, then you can table it again to a next meeting, but you need to set a date and time. Or you can let it die, or you can approve it. Those are your choices.
Okay, so, why don't we,
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
I hadn't piped up yet. You know, we could keep discussing it and discussing it, it'd be 9 o'clock. But they've done a lot of work, and a lot of this makes sense, and it still gives us the power to discern what we want in our neighborhoods, or whatever size lots and where, and we still have the power to say yes or no to that, correct?
Yes, except for part of this is the table of uses, and that is the area where I think your eyes are most important, making sure that which uses are permitted, which are special use, and which have supplementary standards is very important.
Didn't you say we could leave the table out tonight?
You could choose to leave that out, but that's the part that I'm most concerned about. Because it's really me, it's, you know,
That was my main concern is, you know, we can table or do that table or leave it out, but that as long as we have the power, I don't mean the power, but the control over what's happening within the district, that you know, the districts we're talking about, R6 and R8 and what we want, and somebody can't come in and build something without our knowledge. That's as long as that, I'm fine with it, but, you know, I'll do whatever we decide together.
all right, any other thoughts on it? Any other questions, I guess, for Stephen? This time we can go ahead and close the public hearing.
So move, Mayor.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so now, a couple of options there, right, that we just heard. We can either approve as is, we can approve without the table of uses. Or, I mean, there are a lot of changes here, and I'll admit I haven't looked at every single one of these changes myself, right? You know.
If nothing else, I think if nothing else, that we just table it till the December 1st meeting. That gives us more time to review it, and then just bring it back up again if anybody has any questions. If you don't have any questions, we're okay, we roll on. I'm okay with that, but that gives me another month to read the material. Since you don't have a deadline, you want it done by January, December the 1st, acting upon it December 1st will be fine. And that just gives us that extra time to read through the material. And if we have any questions, we certainly can ask questions before December the 1st. So when we get here, we should already have any questions that we know. And then I don't think it would take that long unless if it's a major issue, we just have to reschedule. We could schedule something then if we needed to.
Right.
So
Right.
I think that's my recommendation, is to table it to December the 1st is what I'm doing. This item tabled since we got to give a date, until December the 1st meeting.
Okay, was that a motion?
That is a motion.
All right, so I have a motion to table this item until the December 1st meeting. The motion, do I have a second? Seconded by Councilman Stevens. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right.
And just as a point, any of you who have questions about anything, come see me. I mean, I can walk you through and kind of address your questions, or we can figure out what are the issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Nice work. We appreciate it. We're looking forward to getting this approved. It'll make our process a lot easier. So. All right. Okay, at this time, let's see, I believe we are at citizens' comments. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak at this time, please come forward. State your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is David Johnson. I currently reside at 39 Sassafras Lane in Clayton. Yes, you know why I'm here. My goal is to not let the, sense of urgency slide on the flooding issue on the 1600 block of 301. 4 years ago, like I said, it was much of my fault by sort of letting my guard down and not coming to some sort of resolution. There have been meetings, and I appreciate that. I'm getting information second and third hand. I'm not 100% sure, but it's my understanding that CSX has allowed a preliminary engineering study to be done at a cost of approximately $15,000. I was wondering if the town has to request that preliminary study. Is my information wrong?
Yeah, so I don't know if, as far as the amount, right, I'm not sure if that is correct. But there have been meetings, right, and I think there's been meetings with Senator Jackson's office and a couple of others, but at this time, the town has not, whatever the cost is, the town has not approved to move forward with any engineering studies, right? But the plan is to hopefully start having some meetings with the property owners so that we bring the property owners together with staff, myself, and any others, right? I can't have the full council there, but to start those discussions and let's see if there's what kind of options we do have. But to answer your question, as far as the approval to move forward with an engineering study, no, because we that has not come forward yet.
Okay. It just, and that's fine. I just know that as Councilman Stevens stated, we can talk about things forever into perpetuity, I guess, and meet. Bottom line is, we all know that there's X amount of water coming in and X amount of water going out. So how we get to a resolution, but we've already, since this, I was here last council meeting, one of the land property owners is no longer in financial solvency because 2 floods have basically taken him out, and it's just a matter of time before the 3rd flood will take somebody else out, and there are just millions of dollars worth of damages at each flood. So there is a sense of urgency, and I just want to relay that to the council. And I would like to be part of the solution, not be part of the problem. Okay?
Thank you. Mr. Manager, if you will, make sure that we include Mr. Johnson on any invites that we may have that pertain to meetings with the business owners in that area, if you don't mind, please. All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else wishing to speak during citizens' comments? Okay. Seeing none, we will now move on to the consent agenda. Do I have an approval to, or a motion to approve, excuse me, the consent agenda as amended?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Now we'll move on to business item number 1. Page 143 of your packets. Consideration and request for approval for Riverbank refurbish it along the Greenway. Mike and Bill, is Bill? Yeah, Bill's here. Okay.
You're right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor said, this is on page, starts on page 143 of your packet. As we talked last month, we have a riverbank washout, should be just north of Market Street Bridge. You have some pictures of the washout on page 145 and 146. As you can see, the washout goes straight down from the cement greenway all the way to the river, and it is a repair that is tenuous and needs to be completed. We estimated the repair at between $95,000 and $100,000 last month. We have since received a quote at $96,920, which is a low quote. We did meet with the county at their last county board meeting and asked for their assistance in financing some of this as an unbudgeted expense. The county agreed to grant us $20,000 to assist in this process, which would be a reimbursed amount after we're done with the project. Then we would be reimbursed the $20,000. That would leave $76,920 for the repair, which we can take out of general fund contingency. We did have a second bid at $114,122. We did not receive 3 quotes as we like to have. We did go out and try to get quotes from 4 other companies as listed on page 144 of your packet, and none of those companies would bid. Jimmy Edwards would be the low bidder at $96,920. He also did the similar repair just south of this repair, which the two would actually be connected when we were done. And that repair held during this last flood event on September 1st, August 31st. So we feel pretty good about redoing the same thing here since we've had success with it. However, the river is what the river is. So it's going to be, there's no guarantees that anything we do out there is going to hold, but we definitely have to do something if we want to continue the use of the Greenway path in this area and make sure that it's safe for our citizens and visitors who are using that path. So staff recommends that we approve Jimmy Edwards construction for this amount. Greg will come back to you later if approved with a budget amendment to move the money from contingency. We'll wait until after the repair is done to make sure we have a true amount of the cost.
Any questions for Mike?
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scott, what's the balance of our contingency fund?
We have a little over $200,000 in there right now.
How's that going to impact the next business item?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
How's it going to impact the next business item, Spring Branch? Have we got another way to fund that?
Well, yeah, we can talk about that next. What we would recommend with that is that we use the grant money to do the design and development of that project, which is a little over $100,000, and right at $100,000, and then budget the remaining amount for that in the next fiscal year. The other alternative for that would be we could take the money out of fund balance as opposed to contingency, which would be $100,500 if I recall, and do the whole project now. But it doesn't hurt us on that project to put the remaining funds, non-grant funds, our match amount off until July 1st. But you have to understand that that will need to be a budgeted expense then. We're contracting to do that work then. So those are 2 options you can do with that won't impact our contingency money. I would also, I can address it now or I can address it then, but our draft audit is completed and it's on the desk of the Local Government Commission for approval. And our fund balance at the end of last fiscal year, July, is estimated at over 100%. So we've actually improved our fund balance from last year. So we have the money there if we want to use it.
I just struggle with spending our emergency fund or contingency fund, putting it to zero. I would think it'd be better to move the money. But I think the project needs to be done. We're gonna maintain that trail for safety.
Any other questions for Mike? Mike, I remembered the other item that I just mentioned in my office before this meeting that I needed to talk to you about, and it was on this issue. A couple of questions that were raised, I think, maybe during the county meeting that you attended. So if you will remind me after this meeting, we will discuss those as well. Maybe some questions that came up here.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner contacted me about. So. Any other questions for Mike?
Bill is here if you want him to address the actual repair and his confidence in making it, as well as his confidence in the reasonableness of this price tag.
Definitely think it's something that needs to happen, right? I don't think we have much of a choice. So I understand Councilman Scott's concern though, but obviously if we have that issue, then we may have to look towards fund balance on another project.
Yes.
Something to that effect. I mean,
Mayor, I'd make a motion that we approve the request, $76,000 from contingency to Mr. Edwards, low bid, and receive the $20,000, or I know it's a match. I'm very thankful for the county supporting us.
second. Okay. Got a motion and a second to approve with funds coming from the contingency. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And then we'll move on to business item 2, consideration and request for approval of the Spring Branch Community Restoration Project contract with KCI. Stephen?
I had a presentation, but it was really the rehash of the last one. And Mike basically just gave my presentation, the funding options. So the intent, looking at it, we could get all the design and permitting all done using the AG money and not have to dig into any contingency funds, and then wait to the new budget year, provide a new budget for the remainder, and start the remainder of the construction project after that, and still wrap up at a reasonable time before the end of the year. Or, as Mike said, it could all be done with the contingency funds.
We just spend it all.
Fund balance. Fund balance.
I don't think it's going to quite cover it.
Thanks, Mike.
Can't get blood out of a turnip.
That's right.
So what is any other questions about the project, or?
Mr. Winsman, I do have some questions about this. Can you explain to the council how this is going to help with the flooding versus the trail portion? And what portion, is it a two-phase project?
The second phase is really the trail. And, again, it's not designed. We're not entirely sure if the trail can go where we were thinking it can go, because this is a FEMA lot. So there's some exploration and approvals that are needed. But the intent is to put in a trail, hopefully a paved trail, but it could be a chip trail, and that all impacts the second phase costs. The Visitors Bureau is able to use tourism money for that project, so that is an option for funding that second phase. So this, right now, we're concerned about the first phase, which is the construction of the wetland and stream bank restoration on that, that whole block. And so this is going to help with flooding. So as the riverbank, as the spring branch fills up, this will provide an outlet for floodwaters to flow into and slowly seep into the ground as opposed to running downstream and causing more impacts downstream. So hopefully lessening the flooding of the few residential properties and a commercial property that exist downstream. You know, there are still issues on Spring Branch causing flooding, you know, undersized culverts under the roads.
Where would this start at? Would it start at Second Street?
I could go back to my map.
About a kiddie park?
It's on your slide.
It's the block that the community gardens on. 5th and 6th, thank you.
Okay. All right.
And I had the question today whether the trees would be impacted on that lot. I don't anticipate any existing trees being impacted. The intent really is to improve the stream bank so that it's not eroding and collapsing and provide this, you know, constructed wetland, which is an overflow. And all this has to be designed. It's not designed yet, but that's the intent. That was the vision for it. And, you know, the impetus for this whole thing came out of the hazard mitigation study that was done several years ago. This was one of the projects that was identified.
So if it's approved, what's the time frame? If we use fund balance, if we don't use fund balance? Budget the next year, we use it now.
Right.
What's the time frame?
Oh, if we have to wait on construction until after July 1st, obviously April was kind of our target for starting construction, so it's just going to put us back that much. 3 months. Still gets it done at a reasonable time. And the contractors know about this, and they're still agreeing to the estimate that they provided for the work, so for the contracted amount, they're okay with it.
Any other questions? If not, what is the pleasure of the board?
I move that we take the matching funds, $100,500, and do the planning and then budget the remaining amount in next year's budget.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second.
Mayor, I have discussion.
Discussion, yes, sir.
I think we just heard that it needs to be done, so
I agree. I think we should do it right now. Use the fund balance and be done with it. That's my opinion. Of course, I voted for it last month, nobody else did. Well, excuse me.
I did.
They got kiboshed by Councilman Stevens. I wasn't even here. I know. You still get blamed for it.
You on the phone?
I will not support your motion.
All right.
Any further discussion on it?
Can I say, I don't have a problem withdrawing my motion and changing it to pay for it out of fund balance. I don't have a problem with that. I was moving us down the road.
Well, I'd rather do.
Because that was a recommendation from the manager. I was going with the manager's recommendation. But I thought if the majority wants to take it out of the fund balance and pay for it now, I got no problem with that.
Yeah.
But I've already made the motion. Well, I can withdraw my motion, can I not?
You can amend it.
I'd like to amend my motion. No, I don't. I'm gonna keep what I got. Vote for it one way or the other. Let's go. You got I'm not changing my motion. It's still the same. $100,500 now, and then the rest of it next year in the budget. That's my motion. And we had a second.
But didn't you state in that motion that you wanted to delay it till the next fiscal year?
Yeah, that said it would be in the next year's budget. That's what the manager recommended.
In other words, the construction cannot start until July.
The construction couldn't start until July 1st because we didn't have the funds. But it would be in the budget and not taken out of contingency or out of fund balance.
I understand his motion because I thought it was what you said.
No, that's not.
Make a motion, I'll second it.
So, So Stephen, you did say though, I just want to be clear as part of, I guess, the discussion process. You said that, in your opinion, we could delay this.
Yes, it's been
As
discussed
the
with
manager
contractor.
has recommended, and you've talked with the companies that would be doing the work, and they would still, I mean, that's kind of a long ways away to still honor a construction.
Yeah, they'd be much happier doing it now.
Yeah.
I mean, starting it now and just working straight through, because they're concerned about prices, but they understand the politics, and they, you know, they want the job.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, any further discussion? If not, I do have a motion and a second on the table to approve the funding for the planning and then delay the construction until the approval of next year's budget. Do I have a motion and a second? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, so the motion does fail, right? Not right.
I would like to make a motion to approve using the grant money now and taking the money out of fund balance to complete the project, or starting the project now and completion for the end of the year. Fiscal year.
Yep. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this?
Mayor, yes, I think it's important that we consider, ask Mr. Seiler about the fund balance. I mean, we do have restricted and unrestricted funds. We'd ask him to find the most appropriate place to take this money. I mean, that doesn't change the motion, it's just, I support the motion. Huh?
That's what, I'm pretty sure Michael's on that.
Does that answer your question, Councilman Scott? Okay, any further discussion on this? And we are looking at, let's see. Okay, so roughly $100,000, is that what we're talking about? Coming out of fund balance. Okay. All right, I had a motion and a second on the table. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Carried, Mr. Blue.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Later, but it carries.
People need some help. They need water in the house. They need water. No, I'm here. I had 3 cars full of that. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, we'll move on to business item number 3, consideration and request for approval for easement amendment for Camden Ranch. It's found on page 185 of your packet. Stephen, turn this over to you, sir.
With the approval of the Camden Ranch, if you recall, one of the discussions was providing an access to the cemetery, the historic cemetery back in the farm field. And at that time, they agreed to provide a 18-foot easement along the property along, I can't even see this map on my own screen, but coming off of Swift Creek Road, along that edge to the edge of the development to the cemetery. And Shannon handed out a revised easement that was negotiated because those that have family members in the cemetery were pretty uncomfortable with that access because it had a lot of trees in it, which is going to impede their ability to easily walk through there without having to do major removal of trees. So that more or less got renegotiated with Bob and their attorney. And what they've agreed to do is to provide a 10-foot easement across a shared property line adjacent to the cemetery. And you've got the revised drawing in front of you. The one in your packet, they found out there's a utility conflict, so they moved it to the other property line. So that's why you've got the revised drawing. So they're basically wanting to make sure the council is okay amending that condition, because the condition was very specific about an 18-foot wide easement. So it would be just exchanging that, and when the final plat comes, which is going to come soon for the development, it would reflect this easement on that final plat.
Mr. Winsman, is the people that have been maintaining the cemetery okay with the change?
That's my understanding. Is that correct, Bob? You've had discussions with the cemetery representative?
Our concern with the plat has been that it provided a theoretical access, but not an actual access. If you look at the big trees, okay, so you wouldn't be able to drive them. But you can see now on this plat, it's blue, it's small, it's narrow, but you're coming right off the public road, street, between two lots into that cemetery. Gives it much more direct access.
And there would be, it's a ditch section, so there would be a culvert, so that you could actually bring a vehicle in. It would be on that 10-foot easement, so it would meet all the needs that they have. It would be maintained by the adjacent property owners because it's their property, and as you recall, this family gathers at the cemetery generally once a year, and they do maintenance and, pray and celebrate.
My only concern with it is looking at it and knowing how important that is to the community. That puts them in the back of the cemetery. I mean, I don't know that makes a big difference, but it could. I mean, I'm thankful that they've able to work out a plan. Who's going to maintain the culvert?
Probably the HOA or the property owners because it's on their property.
Okay.
It's a DOT street.
Okay.
And this is more closely to the route that they currently use to get to the cemetery. They were crossing that farm field.
Yeah, that's what I thought I remembered them
Coming
saying.
off the highway.
No, the highway was a new introduced location.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They were crossing the field.
They were.
Dirt path.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
So this would address, the statute about providing reasonable access.
It's 10 foot. That's the number we put out of the air. That seems kind of.
That was the width that was agreed upon between the developer and Mr. Spence. It is wide enough to get a vehicle in. It's not a lot of extra room, but it's wide enough. Brush hog or some other vehicle.
Because I understand if they did too wide, it could affect the ability to sell that property. So, I mean, I think it's a good compromise. I'm very thankful they could work it out.
Well, you nailed it, that's what it is, I think, a compromise, but I think it's gonna help the cemetery people.
Are they currently maintaining that cemetery?
I'm sorry?
Is the cemetery being maintained?
It's maintained by the family whose relatives are buried there.
According to your order, you said that all parties are in agreement with the,
Well, that was my understanding. I guess I understood that they were all in agreement, but the whole issue the family had was with the trees and the easement. So I think if the trees are gone and they can still bring a vehicle in and they can still get access, I think it meets the statutes and it meets what I've heard is their issue.
well, you're telling us we don't know if the family agrees with it or not.
I've not had that conversation since it was turned over to the attorneys.
So they may not like it at all. We don't know.
Well, I know they'll like it better than what they had.
Well, I understand, but we don't know if this is acceptable to them at all because we don't know, right? I mean,
We do not, who is the lady whose name is
Mrs. Tuck?
Dr. Washington,
Yeah,
D.C. or something?
yeah.
We do not contact her in Washington, D.C. Okay? As I say, this is a historic cemetery.
I mean,
We can get back and try to contact her, but I really think that this is something that works.
They have access on a road, a public road, correct? For the cemetery when they come in.
Cemetery's got, they've got access now on a public street to the subdivision. Before they had
A path,
a path walk
right.
to the woods.
So this would be a paved road.
If
Well-
they road set for about 100 feet or so to get to the cemetery.
Yeah. That's common sense.
Mayor, I think we just, in the sensitivity of the developer, they're trying to move their project forward, I don't think we should delay based on the evidence that's presented before us. We're just looking for a motion to approve this?
Yes, sir.
Do we even need a motion? Okay, we need a motion.
So moved, Mayor.
Because it will go on the final.
A motion and a second to approve the proposed easement as stated on this plat which you've given us. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next item is business item number 4, consideration and request for approval of a social media policy for appointed board members and elected officials. Mike and Tim.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council had communicated to me earlier that they asked staff to come up with a social media policy for appointed board members and elected officials. We provided the draft policy to the council via email some time ago, received a little bit of feedback on it, and that draft is starts on page 191. Mr. Kerrigan worked very hard at trying to draft this policy and looked at several policies from other organizations in doing so. So I'll let him address his work on this policy.
Yes, sir, thank you. Yeah, I had, Mike had come to me with this request to draft a social media policy for town council and for all town boards. So as the manager mentioned, I looked at several other towns in the state and in the country as well, and drafted this policy and reviewed this with the town attorney, with Mr. Spence, and to get his input from that as well. So what you have before you is what we would like for you to review. If you've had a chance to review that, possibly make any amendments to it, and then approve if you so choose. Of course, that is not necessary now. That can be done at a date to be in the future, but really looking for, since it was the council's request for us to draft the policy, asking for council's direction going forward.
Any questions, thoughts on this? I know we've had this out for a little while, so what are the thoughts of the council? Ready to approve tonight, or?
I thought it was pretty comprehensive myself when I read it.
Mayor, I do have a couple questions about the policy presented. I think it would be important for us to have the boards that it's going to affect review it, and perhaps provide feedback, because those are volunteers. Perhaps there's something that we've missed or haven't or shouldn't touch on that may be of interest to them. And I also would ask Mr. Kerrigan, how does this reflect with our current staff policy? And should we also implement that, let the employee committee review that and possibly implement that for staff?
Yes, sir, and as great idea on that. We've not had the opportunity to have that committee. We've not been having those meetings as we had frequently in the past with primarily with COVID concerns and things of that nature. That is one that is difficult to have over virtual meetings. It's really one that takes the in-person interaction to discuss those. But we have been increasing those types of meetings, so we certainly could do that at your direction. To address the other question of how does it reflect or with policies that would address employees, we are looking at those policies as well, of updating that. And the third policy that would fall in line with this would be one for general public that are using or commenting on town sites. So Facebook, Twitter, anything that we might maintain. So we are updating that one as well. But certainly you have to be very careful in monitoring the public comments on the sites. So we try to respond as much as possible and primarily use those social media sites as a way to get the questions that the public has to our staff. Many times with trash pickup or scheduling, things like that, and we will respond that, yes, we've spoken to Public Works and they'll contact you back, or here's where you can contact them. We try not to get into too much conversation on that. It's just not as good to do there. So at times, if there is a comment that is inappropriate language or things like that, we have the ability to delete those, but we really want to strengthen that policy a bit to let everyone know that.
Yeah, I actually had the same thought that, as Councilman Scott has, is about allowing the boards to provide any input and so forth, right? So this has not been shared with any of the boards.
No, sir.
Any further questions, thoughts on this? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move that we ask the staff to submit this to the other board members and to the employee committee for review, and bring it back to us at a later date once they have the ability to do that, and seeking their feedback on this policy.
Okay. I have a motion to have a second.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for that direction. We'll bring that back to you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Let's see. I think that is the last item. And we'll move to council members' comments. Anybody wishing to speak this time, please do so.
Yeah, I got a few comments. I'm going to kind of address the town of Smithfield and whoever else is watching. Dealing more so with me than anything. Just to let everybody know that Councilman Lee is A-OK. There was an incident the first night of early voting over at First Baptist Church. I've been highly advised not to speak on it too much, but just going to say I'm okay. It should have been a court date today. It's been pushed back. And through some good old investigations, some more stuff is going to come out of here. Our police department needs to be more accountable. The integrity of some things that were said. And stay tuned. That's all I got to say.
Any other comments?
Mayor, I know we had an email come out about the Christmas parade, and I'm disappointed that we can't have our Christmas parade, but I understand the restrictions. I certainly wish that we could come up with a way to do that. Sarah, do we have any options? Not really. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you planned that with the Parks and Rec and other folks. But thank y'all for your efforts. I just hope that, I was hopeful that we could have that, but I understand the regulations and reasons behind that. Having said that, Mayor, I'd like to make one other comment. I would like to thank our public utilities. We suffered a power outage on the north side of town early one morning, a few weeks ago. Well, it's not been, actually it's been not a few weeks. Time flies. But it was, they were on it and had it back on before most people even knew it was a problem. We had some winds. And I think it's important that we highlight the benefit of having our utilities locally and managing our community. And we're very thankful for what they do. Oh, and we got good rates.
That's right. Can you say that a little louder? Well, you might could. Councilman Barber, did you have something, sir?
Yeah, I got a couple. Just a reminder that we are continuing to drive our drone technology policy and program. We are currently trying to get with, I thought I talked with Brian today. Brian's kind of heading that up. Brian Eves, we are working on trying to get with Parks and Recreation to identify locations within the town that would be safe places for our people that have drones to fly. You know, instead of just flying in the neighborhoods, people get a little nervous about that. But if you have designated park space that we could be designated for that, that would be helpful. We're also, we had a meeting, I'm not sure last month, but we had a meeting with, we brought in a specialist from 910 Drones to talk about the possibilities of what need to be done and how they could be used. So we have, our departments are actually pursuing what can they use them for, what's the benefits for them, what would be the type of drone, what the cost is, with the intent. The hopes are that some type of a policy for the town would be implemented and a policy for the employees of the town and a policy for the citizens of the town, and also for a strategy on how to implement a drone program that would benefit the town of Smithfield. You understand? So it's not just buying drones for the sake of drones, but it's saving lives, because it can save lives. It takes away a lot of the danger in police department and in our public works department. There's a lot of things that can be done that can save that. So we're working on that. Also, I just want to say a thank you to the leaf collection guys. Man, those guys are working hard out there. I'm going to tell you, I couldn't get my leaves up before they were out there sucking them up. They're very friendly. They're out there helping me rake it. I mean, I'm telling you, I always say this about our people that work for Smithfield. I have nothing but good to say. Those are some great people. Work very hard all the time. Rain, sleet. It's going to be raining hard on Thursday morning, but they'll be out there in the rain working away. And I just want to say, as a councilman and as a citizen of Smithfield, I appreciate what they do, and I think all of us, when we see them, should say thank you for what you do and show them our appreciation, because they're some hard-working people, and we're very fortunate to have them. So.
Any other comments?
I got one
Yes,
or two.
Councilman Stevens?
I'd like to reiterate what Councilman Scott said about Christmas. He may understand the regulations, but I haven't yet in the last 7 months. But maybe somebody will explain it to me that's smarter than I am. But I really wish we could get everybody together and have the Christmas tree lighting. Maybe some time for them. Maybe restrictions will lessen up. That's one hope we can have. Because I really enjoy that, and the community gets out there and and had the schools and everybody singing. It's a pretty neat experience, When I first got on, I got in December, and then they said, "Oh, you're a councilman, now you got to ride in the Christmas parade in a car." And I didn't want to, but Shannon made me get in, and because I wanted to see my daughter and son in the parade. But fortunately, since we were first in line, we had to do that. And thank you so much for that, Shannon. But I wish we could have Christmas, but maybe we can later on, or hopefully next year.
Anything else?
I think we ought to challenge the mayor to decorate his house.
What's that now? I'm sorry.
We about to challenge you to decorate the outside of your house.
I'm not so sure my wife is going to allow that. But if you, hey, I would love to if you can get her to agree to it. So there are some things that are being planned, right? The light up Christmas, light up Smithfield, if you will, is coming, right? And for residential and businesses, and there will be some prizes that will be voted on, and some prizes and so forth. So that's coming, and I think we do maybe have some other options for tree lighting and so forth that's being discussed, and maybe some other things that are kind of in the works for some things to do, even though we may not have a parade. So looking forward to the finalization of those so that we can let everybody know, what those are, those things that are happening. So thank you, staff and Sarah and your team for what you're doing to try to think outside of the box. Even though we may not be having a parade this year, and Mike, I guess that's, if you're looking for direction on the parade, I think you're probably getting that tonight, right? I think, that's probably a unfortunate thing, but thanks again for the, kind of thinking outside the box, and let's see if we can come up with some other things that we can do during this time, because we certainly need it for 2020. The way that it's been, we certainly do need it. I did want to comment. I had a long conversation today with Councilman Barber, and he mentioned this drone policy and what we're doing. The things that he informed me about, I wasn't aware of, and I'm pretty excited about it. And so I am looking forward to that. And if I may maybe ask that we have an update, even without a policy in place yet, maybe if we could spend about 5 minutes of an update at our next, if it's not at our next council meeting, maybe at the January one, but as soon as we can, to just kind of let everybody know kind of what the thoughts are, because there are a lot of interesting things out there that we could utilize drones and drone technology for that I never even thought of until I had this conversation today with Councilman Barber. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I think it's good if we kind of had an update on that. I think that would be outstanding. The other thing is that it was mentioned the rain, right? Just for the public and so forth. You mentioned leaves, and this time of year putting leaves out, especially with the rain that we are expecting over the next few days. I would like to ask that. Yes, get your leaves out to the road, but let's be mindful of where we put our leaves and where we put our grass clippings and so forth, because you put those upstream or near one of our culverts, and everything washes right into that. And it clogs it up. It clogs up our sewer lines, and therefore we have flooding, right? So my ask is anybody listening to this, is that I know we have tried to get some information out about this, is that sooner or later as Smithfield grows, we do have an excellent team. But my fear is that if we don't start right now educating our citizens, that as this town grows, we are going to have to stop that. We are going to have to become one of those towns that say, no, you cannot do that. You're going to have to bag everything. You're going to have to put it in cans, which I advise anyway. It makes it probably easier. Or we're only going to pick it up at certain times of the year, and these are the restrictions. And, certainly don't want to go there, but as we grow as a community, those are the things that we're going to have to start thinking about. And I ask this council and staff and the news media and everybody else to help us spread the word of kind of the do's and don'ts when you put things out at the street, because as we grow, right, I just think it's going to become more of a problem. So not only, speaking of the rain that is forecasted over the next few days, right, we potentially could have some flooding. And please, to the citizens, please, 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 do not cross a flooded street. But it is just not worth it. So if we do experience that over the next few days, my message to the public is do not do it, right? Stop, turn around, but do not cross. You may think it's only a couple of inches deep, and in reality, it could just take your car right away off of the road. So I ask that we all be mindful of that, especially over the next few days. So that's all that I have. If there's no further comments from the council, I will turn it over to the manager for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few things. Mentioned the Christmas parade. We are looking to cancel the parade, as you said. We appreciate the feedback from the council on that. It is an unfortunate situation this year, but it's just very difficult to meet the requirements and have one and keep everybody safe. In that same vein, we're also looking to cancel our employee Christmas party that we usually have, or luncheon that we usually have at the Shrek. So the departments instead will be having individual, smaller get-togethers amongst themselves to celebrate Christmas this year. So we'll not have that large-scale event that we usually have every year. With Christmas, there are some things that are coming about. I encourage everybody to watch our social media and our Facebook pages. Besides the Christmas tree lighting that's coming up, which we'll have on Facebook, we also have a Grinch grab as well as Smithfield Santa sleigh ride, which is going to be Santa Claus going around to every neighborhood in Smithfield on the back of a fire truck, and at least being able to wish Merry wishes to the children and anybody else in the neighborhood. We'll come up with a schedule of that as close as we can in the near future, and we'll also post that information. Tomorrow, we have our Veterans Day celebration. Unfortunately, we're going to have some rain, but we're still going to have the celebration. So we encourage people to come out, stay in their vehicles, park in places where there's a spot in between everybody so you're social distancing well, and watch the fireworks. Fireworks should kick off about 5:45. At 5:30 prior to that, Mayor will be out at Triple S football field doing a presentation and a dedication. At 5:15, weather permitting, we have 3 troopers from Fort Bragg that are going to jump out for us and land on Triple S football field. Now, that's going to be suspect based on the weather. But if possible, they'll be doing that. And at 4:15, we're going to have a ribbon cutting out at the DAV equipment at the DAV building there near Community Park. So we're going to dedicate all that new equipment out there at 4:15. So that's kind of the schedule of events. 4:15, the ribbon cutting. 5:15, the troopers jump out. 5:30, the mayor does his presentation. Fireworks start 5:45. So I'm going to try to stick to that schedule, rain or shine. I briefly mentioned some positive things about our audit. It is completed. It remains in draft form until it has local government commission approval, which they have it now. So we anticipate that'll occur yet this month. And we have a presentation by our auditor for the council scheduled for our December 1st meeting. So that will come out then. Equity Drive, if you've been out there, you see that work's actually being done now. J. Smith Civil, is out there doing curb and gutter work right now, and they'll be getting into sidewalk work next. Quite a bit of work being done already, so if you haven't been out there, take a trip around there if you can avoid the cement trucks that are usually out there. One thing in your packet is a short paragraph on the possibility of implementing a municipal batteries to try to deal with load management throughout our entire town. Load management has been something that we've talked about for quite a while, and we've tried to manage it individually from household to household by putting a battery system. You can lease them, you can buy them, out at one of our, probably the Brogden Road station, to help basically take that load off of our transfer station when it's high and put it on a battery. It's something that the court system just allowed us to do. We were blocked by that previously, but it has a whole lot of promise. It's something we need to talk to the council about, so be thinking about that. The best time would be to talk about it in some kind of a workshop, so if we end up having any kind of a workshop for the UDO, we might want to incorporate this too, or have something separate just for this, so that you can see the pros and cons, the cost, pros of leasing, the pros of buying, and some of the issues that may come up in the future with it. So just want to ask you to consider that, think about that a little bit, do your own research if you like. There's quite a bit out there, and we'll try to set something up in the near future. Other than that, just want to wish everybody here and everybody in our community happy Thanksgiving as that time comes around, and please be safe and enjoy your families during that time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If there's nothing else, gentlemen, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We'll stand adjourned. Thank you.